It is impossible not to fall in love with the magical worlds of Hayao Miyazaki. He gave mankind masterpieces of animation that give hope, comfort, and delight.
This place is gorgeous, Hal! It's like a dream.
But what do we know about him? Many viewers, after watching his films and not understanding Miyazaki's biography, imagine him as a kind, smiling Santa Claus. And they are very surprised when, in some interview, the author of The Cute Totoro, chewing a cigarette in his teeth, says with cynical tone something like,
かつてそういう映画が作られたことがあったかもしれないけど、今も映画の価値があるわけじゃない。多くはくだらないんです、僕らのこの世界は。
So what is he really like, Hayao Miyazaki? This is Biographer Express, and today we will talk about the views and beliefs of the famous animator and how they are reflected in his work. Why does Miyazaki hate Disney Studios? Why are young women the main characters of most of his works? And why does the master criticize modern anime? We'll figure it out now. Miyazaki always insists that he makes his films primarily for children. The director has repeatedly said that adults disappoint him, and he places his only hope on the younger generation. He believes that modern children were born in a difficult time. The burden of excessive expectations of parents, fierce competition at school, future problems with employment lies on their shoulders. Giving a child an hour of happiness is perhaps more important than giving a whole year of happiness to an adult, because this hour will affect his whole future life. We have a great responsibility. However, the charm of Miyazaki's work lies in the fact that adults also get great pleasure from his films, finding solace and new meanings in them. He does not simplify the plot, makes no allowance for the age of the target audience. Miyazaki communicates with children on an equal footing through his films, not afraid to show that the world is complicated and not everything has a happy ending in real life.
Even if all the trees return, it won't be his forest anymore. The great forest spirit is dead now.
Never. He's life itself. He's not dead, son. He's here right now, trying to tell us something.
This is very different from the cheerful, naive Disney world, which was counterbalanced by the fictional, but at the same time more close to the real, Miyazaki world. It sometimes seems that Miyazaki contradicts himself with such an approach to making films. He often says that he creates his films as a consolation. Creating animation means creating a fictional world. That world soothes the spirit of those who are disheartened and exhausted from dealing with the sharp edges of reality. At the same time, unlike modern American animated films which tend to end with happily ever after, or at least victory over enemies, Miyazaki offers something more vague and even disturbing. So why does Hayao Miyazaki not create a rosy picture, far from reality, which would distract both children and adults, making them forget about troubles for a while, and possibly troubles? The answer lies in the character, life values, and biography of the great animation master himself. The master is not afraid to raise difficult topics, such as wars, ecology, diseases, feminism, family tragedies, everything that exists in the past and in the present, and at least in the near future of mankind. How to live with it, grow up.
I'm not afraid of germs. If you don't play with me, I'll cry. Please don't cry, just wait. Right now, or I'll start crying.
How to continue to dream and fight. The questions that worry people's minds are embodied through Miyazaki animation images, helping to cope with the complexities of life. The director characterizes his films as tough, since adults themselves should have the courage to see the world not through rose-colored glasses. Otherwise, they will not have the right to tell their children something about this world and raise them properly. I'm a pessimist, but I'm not going to make movies that tell children you should despair and run away. All I want to say is don't be afraid. Someday everything will fall into place, and somewhere, something good is definitely waiting for you. At the same time, I'm not interested in telling children lies about wars, economic crises, environmental destruction. I have witnessed all of this firsthand. Therefore, my films must be tough. If we don't face the truth, we have no right to tell stories to children. In other words, the same Disney deceives children. Americans reduce our life with all its conflicts to a simple formula: good against evil.
So Hades, you finally made it. How are things in the underworld?
Well, they're just fine. You know, a little dark, a little gloomy, and as always, hey, full of dead people. What are you gonna do?
Miyazaki understands that it is impossible to dump his cynicism, disbelief, and his negative feelings as a heavy burden on the younger generation. They will find out about all this themselves when they grow up. Yet even amidst the hatred and carnage, life is still worth living. It is possible for wonderful encounters and beautiful things to exist. He wants to give support to children who have a hard time. When, for instance, one of my staff has a baby, you can't help but bless them for a good future, because I can't tell that child, oh, you shouldn't have come into this life. And yet I know the world is heading into a bad direction. So with those conflicting thoughts in mind, I think about what kind of films I should be making. At least I would love to see the apocalypse, he adds, but I'm unlikely to be alive to see this moment. Therefore, I can only fantasize. Miyazaki can often confuse you with statements that contradict one another. In one interview, he will explain for a long time how important it is to make good, encouraging films for children, that he wants to get through his films to genuine, forgotten values that can only be found in a child. And in another, he will say that he does not think that cinema can be used as a force for good. Film doesn't have that kind of power, he says. It only exerts its influence when it stirs patriots up against other nations or taps into aggressive, violent urges. Nevertheless, Miyazaki continues to create films, because he can't do otherwise, and also because he's sure. You have to be determined to change the world with your films, even though nothing changes. Do you agree that Miyazaki, with all his pessimism and sometimes gloomy pictures, gives people a charge of positive emotions? Share your opinion in the comments. Except for just two pictures, Porco Rosso and The Wind Rises, the main characters of Miyazaki's films shot for the Studio Ghibli are children. Moreover, in most cases, they are either little girls or young women. When a journalist once asked Miyazaki about the reasons for the abundance of female characters in his films, he explained that an adult man, in principle, cannot be the hero of any story because facing with evil, he is always looking for someone to shoot off his head. And this is a vicious path. The real strength of his heroines is not in the muscles but in the beauty of the soul, in diligence, loyalty, and kindness. Although they are ordinary children, teenagers, they are capable of a lot because inner strength and courage help them overcome difficulties.
Howl! Howl's them up! It's me, Sophie! I know how to help you now! Find me in the future!
But this does not mean that they are superheroes who do not know the sense of fear. It's not at all. They are only guided by duty and diligence, which leads them to achieve their goals. At the same time, Miyazaki does not have the final victory of good over evil because he does not have black and white, but there are halftones. There is gray. Even the negative characters who embody evil have a transformation in the course of the plot. But still, they may not become completely good, but rather open up from a new, positive side. Yeah, I don't like unambiguous assessments. I don't like the division into black, white, bad, good. Take, for example, the same World War II. Japan suffered a lot, but it was guilty towards many. We still feel this guilt. After that, how to declare someone good and someone bad? Once, when Miyazaki was asked about villains in an interview, he said, "When I create a villain, I start liking the villain, and the villain becomes a being who is not really evil." As an example, he cited one of the old cartoons about Superman of the 40s, where an antagonist has created a secret underground lair. The level of effort and focus involved in a scheme like that, Miyazaki says, should be admirable in its own way, even lovable. Villains actually work harder than the heroes.
それから本当に心に穴が開いてしまった悪役を出すと映画全体が本当にすさんだものになりますから、それはやっぱり描きたくないんですね。アニメーターが仕事やってる時見ると、こう笑顔を描いてる時は笑顔になってるんです。それから悪役を描いてる時は大抵嫌な顔して描いてますから、なるべく笑顔の方が長い方が映画としてはいいんじゃないか。
Thus, Hayao tells us that the world is much more complicated. People and their actions are much more complex than we see it. The child's faith in miracles is supported by the wonderful world created by the author, but at the same time, his heroes have to make difficult choices and eventually overcome their inner demons. Because both Miyazaki's spirits and people are complex and ambiguous. And the author shows us that everything that happens, both good and evil, begins with ourselves. There's a certain contradiction in the master's films. On the one hand, it is a fairy tale that makes a child believe in miracles, and on the other, even a miracle is not always able to defeat evil once and for all. Another full-fledged character in Miyazaki's films is nature. This is not just a beautiful background which has a lot of space in the pictures, but also the main value that a person needs to take care of. The master often reminds people about environmental problems that have become too flashy these days. In 1956, a previously unknown disease appeared on the Japanese island of Kyushu, which was called dancing cat fever. Animals were the first to get sick. At that time, you could see dead birds falling from the sky and dead fish floating up. But soon, the disease was transmitted to people, initially to children. The patients were bothered by neurological symptoms, seizures, as well as problems with walking and speech. Many died. After some time, it was revealed that the cause of the disease was water pollution by a local chemical enterprise. Society was stirred up, and the movement for ecology and reasonable consumption began. Hayao Miyazaki also joined this movement. I want to see the sea rise over Tokyo and the NTV Tower become an island. Money and desire, all that is going to collapse, and wild green grasses are going to take over. Miyazaki has been cleaning the river near his house for a long time on Sundays. Once, he even pulled a bicycle out of the river, which was reflected and spirited away. In one of the episodes, a creature comes to the bathhouse, which at first is mistaken for a stink spirit, but in the end it turns out that this is the spirit of the river, wounded by human waste. It was my local river, and there really was a bicycle. It was stuck in there. 10 of us wrapped a rope around the bars and slowly pulled it out. We really cleaned up the river, and the fish are back. And that's why I added that scene. For Miyazaki, nature is a very important value in the life of mankind, which needs to be taken care of and preserved. But he also does not want to be considered the main fighter for ecology in the whole cinema. The director states, "Some people suffer from the misconception that Isao Takahata and I are both some sort of environmentalists and that we will make a film out of anything as long as it has an environmental theme or message. Nothing could be further from the truth. Such a film would be like a fat, dried-up log propped upright. What we need is a living thing with strong roots, a solid trunk and branches, so that we can be creative in the way we hang the ornaments." Miyazaki can be called a person who is not enthusiastic about modern technology. He doesn't have a computer and a smartphone. He doesn't watch TV and almost doesn't watch movies. When Studio Ghibli films first appeared on streaming services, it turned out that Hayao Miyazaki allowed publication largely because he did not quite understand what streaming was. In his work, he rarely resorts to computer technology, preferring to draw by hand. Miyazaki finds inspiration in contemplation, observing the world around him. He has the concept of a creative radius. This is an area about 2 miles around the studio where the director walks looking for ideas for new pictures. For example, My Neighbor Totoro was created under the impression of the view of the nearest bus stop. The master mainly draws by hand. Hayao Miyazaki is a follower of traditional animation, but he cannot be called a conservative. His progressive ideas of feminism, preservation of the environment, humanism, and anti-militarism, which he promoted in the last century, have become a full-fledged trend and have been accepted in society only now. The author reflects in his films on the need for a symbiosis of progress and nature, and also that in the man-made age, even a person's beautiful dreams can be very dangerous and lead to destruction.
飛行機の設計家とか機械を設計した人たちっていうのはこうどんなその時が善であると思ってやってもやっぱり時代の風化の中で機械文明そのもののこう手先になるから無傷じゃないんですよ。呪われた夢なんです。アニメーションもそうです。
So, in the film The Wind Rises, a young aircraft designer, Jiro Hirokoshi, dreamed of creating airplanes from childhood. Aviation for Jiro was the romance of the beauty of airplanes, which, in his opinion, made the world a better place. However, subsequently, his inventions became a war-killing machine. Jiro regretted that his work has become an instrument of destruction, sowing death. Hayao Miyazaki himself has been in love with aviation since childhood, but at the same time, hates war. During World War II, his father was the manager of an aircraft factory that produced spare parts for fighter jets. Even as a little boy, Hayao fell in love with airplanes with all his heart, and the painful realization that many of these creations are designed to kill people torments him throughout his life. I am ashamed of my father's actions. However, I know that he did it in the name of his family because there was no other choice. Does this justify him? No. Can I blame him for that? Not either. The master proclaims his anti-war position, which runs through many of his films from the stage. In 2014, accepting the Academy Honorary Award at the Governor's Awards, he, among other things, said, "Another fact of luck is that my country has not been at war for the 50 years that I've been making films. Of course, we've profited from wars, but we're very fortunate that we've not had to go to war ourselves." These are the words of a man who, as a child, survived the brutal bombing himself and miraculously survived. The childhood experience affected Miyazaki's entire adult life and character by his rejection of any military action, and also made him a pessimist. Miyazaki remembered especially vividly one incident that happened to him during the war. When he was 4.5 years old, the city of Utsunomiya, where he then lived, was subjected to a terrible aerial bombardment. Uncle Hayao had a truck in which the family decided to evacuate the city. Along the way, they came across a group of people who had nowhere to hide. Miyazaki remembers well how a woman's voice said, "Please let us in." He remembers a woman with a little girl in her arms who ran to them and asked for help. And the truck kept going, and a voice pleading, "Please let us in," began to move away, but gradually settled in my head, just as traumatic events are stored in memory. Miyazaki still feels guilty that his parents did not help that woman, although he understands that there were many reasons why this could not be done. Of course, such an incident could not but affect his character and beliefs. By the way, we tell you more about his military childhood, his relationship with his parents, and other details of his biography in our other video. Click on the pop-up card if you're interested. Nevertheless, the author does not denigrate his heroes. He only shows what the development of technology can lead to or has already done. And he also tells about the mutual relations of man-made humanity with nature, when the initial good intention becomes evil in the hands of governments, not only for man, but also for nature. According to Miyazaki, nature, the mountains and rivers, was being destroyed in the name of economic progress. The main thing that the great master wants to convey through a children's fairy tale is the need for balance and harmony between progress and the surrounding world.
The trees cry out as they die, but you cannot hear them. I lie here. I listen to the pain of the forest and feel the ache of the bullet in my chest. And I dream of the day when I will finally crunch that gunwoman's head in my jaws.
Speaking of balance, a huge percentage of viewers watch our videos without a subscription, which means that you can skip the release of new videos about your favorite actors, directors, and musicians. We suggest you join the Biographer Express community by clicking on the subscription button and the bell. We have something to share with you, and your subscription means a lot to us. Thanks. Despite the fantastic, exciting plots and phantasmagoric landscapes, Miyazaki's characters are very realistic. One of the reasons why it is easy for the viewer to associate himself with them is that the master tries to show the lifestyle of his heroes. People live their own lives, cook food, take public transport, clean, work. We observe how designers invent. Workers carry out their work in the field or at the factory. Children play and help adults with household chores. Miyazaki demonstrates a love for work as well as for those who work. Factory workers, farmers in the fields. Even more, in many films, the characters need to work hard to change the situation, to prove that they are worth something.
Calcifer, you're being so obedient.
Not on purpose, she bullied me.
Not just anybody can do that.
It must be said that such respect for a man from the working class logically emerges from Hayao Miyazaki's fascination with Marxism in his youth. He not only openly proclaimed his views, but was also an active participant in the Animators' Union. Proletarian society, in his opinion, reflected the concept of a productive, thinking person who was useful for society and the country. And although over time Miyazaki became disillusioned with many aspects of Marxism, he still believed that good ideas can be found in it. Miyazaki's young heroes often work on a par with adults, clean, cook on their own initiative, and take care of those who are nearby. When the director was told that there was no such good children, he got angry and shouted that there were, because he himself was like that. It is known that Miyazaki has been a great worker since childhood. He took an example of courage and perseverance from his mother, who was struggling with tuberculosis at that time. From the age of 6, Hayao had to help with the housework, even though he was not the oldest child in the family. Diligence, bordering on workaholism, has permeated the life and work of the master forever. Therefore, the studio of Ghibli is arranged under his views. Miyazaki never ceases to impress employees with his passion for work. But like any passion that knows no boundaries, it sometimes becomes dangerous for the people around him. He is brilliant at appropriating someone else's energy. He's always been like that, says his producer Toshio Suzuki. And director Hideaki Anno, agreeing with this idea, adds that the employees are something like pawns for Miyazaki. Some people have completely devastated themselves in an attempt to meet the master's demands. Being unable to comply with the requirements, some lose motivation and hope, thinking that they have failed. Many argue that it is very difficult to work with him.
上手い人は平気なのかなって思うでしょ。でも上手い人もね、逃げてっちゃう時があるのね。しんどくなる。上手ければ上手いほど要求もやっぱりあるし。
Miyazaki, while working on the film, often stays up late in his studio. Therefore, studio employees also have to work, regardless of time. Judging by what they say about the studio, strict discipline reigns there, and employees have to work in rather harsh conditions. Director Mamoru Oshii jokingly, or maybe not, compared Ghibli with the Kremlin, hinting at the totalitarianism that reigned there. Miyazaki reminded him a little of Trotskyist. At the same time, Oshii admitted that it was thanks to the way the work of the studio was built that so many masterpieces were created there. What do other animators think of Ghibli? As far as I know, they basically respect Ghibli. It's half love and half hate. A general response would be, it's a tremendous place, but I don't want to go there, because they control you too tightly. For example, they tell you to come in at 10 in the morning and go home at 10 in the evening, and you just keep on working for 1 or 2 years. In the Ghibli studio, a lot is based on Miyazaki and his vision of the film. They say that the director demands the impossible because he expects his employees to perform drawings exactly the way he imagines it. But how can others guess and do it? That's the trouble, the Ghibli employees complain. Miyazaki personally checks every frame. If he is dissatisfied with the work of artists, he redraws everything himself. In such conditions, the existence of the studio without its key director is under threat, but all the employees seem to have come to terms with this. I think it's really over, Miyazaki once admitted, talking about the fate of Ghibli after he retires. I was preparing receivers, but I was too stubborn. I absorbed them, absorbed their talent. As a result, there was no one to replace me. The studio absorbs people. Miyazaki differs in sharpness and honesty. He will not smooth out the corners and says everything like it is. It's funny that he's often compared to Walt Disney, although he himself isn't a fan of the Mouse Studio. In 1988, at a lecture, he said that he hated Disney films and their sentimentality. For me, they show nothing but contempt for the viewer. But sometimes, he's not sure about his films either. I mean, how do we know that the same films are worth something? If you think about it properly, it's just a big hobby, isn't it? Maybe once it was possible to make films that mean something, but now our world mostly consists of garbage. Ironically, the term anime is very disliked by Miyazaki. Although he has become one of the main symbols of this genre, it's all about his pessimistic attitude about the direction in which the animation is moving. Moreover, he spoke about his disappointment back in the distant 80s. I simply can't discuss the business we are in without a bit of bitterness. Compared to some of the works from the 1950s that I will always hold as a gold standard, the animation that we are making in the 1980s resembles the food served on jumbo jet airliners. The emotions and thoughts that should be so moving have given way to showiness, nervousness, and titillation. Frankly, I despise the truncated word anime because to me it only symbolizes the current desolation of our industry. He is often mistakenly credited with the quote, "Anime was a mistake," which Miyazaki did not actually say. However, he really often criticizes modern animated films. In his opinion, the main problem of anime is otaku creators who don't spend time watching real people. Some people spend their lives interested only in themselves, he said in an interview. Almost all Japanese animation is produced with hardly any basis taken from observing real people, It's produced by humans who can't stand looking at other humans, and that's why the industry is full of otaku. Many were offended by this statement about otaku because in Japan this term has rather a negative connotation, meaning a person who is terribly obsessed with something. But Miyazaki can be understood. As an old-school person who still draws by hand, he hardly perceives new trends in animation, fandoms, and other charms of the 21st century with which he wants nothing to do. Miyazaki is also against corporations like Disney or Warner Brothers because in his opinion they are killing art. Unlike these giants, work and creativity has always been above financial or any other benefits for a great animator. Speaking from my own experience, I would say you shouldn't grow your studio too big. You need to make fewer films, Miyazaki says. Making too many films puts you in a hectic situation. Try to stay modest. In his work, Miyazaki has always been guided by one credo. Be true to your craft without pretensions. Regret comes from having not made a film true to my heart. I would not be able to make another film ever again, Miyazaki says.
理想を失わない現実審査にならないといけないから。理想もない現実審査ならいくらでもいるんです。そうですね。理想がない現実審査ってのは最低通ったからね。そういう現場にしたくないです。
Yeah, he is a man with a tough character. But perhaps it was thanks to his beliefs that Miyazaki managed to stay true to himself in conditions when it was very difficult to create a unique product without succumbing to the manipulation of viewers, investors, and distributors. Many assume that his optimistic films show why he is so cynical. Miyazaki knows that things can be much better than they are now. This tough man, in his old age, does not cease to believe in miracles and gives a fairy tale to both children and adults. This hard-working tyrant creates magical worlds that you believe in as real. This pessimist gives hope and faith in the best. Whatever contradictions may be inherent to the unique master, he gave mankind masterpieces that can resonate for the souls of the audience and eventually make the world a better place. There are also a lot of old-school directors in Hollywood with rather tough characters who raise difficult, controversial topics in their films. One of them is Clint Eastwood. We talked about how he managed to become a cult figure in cinema, what his films are criticized for, and how he works with his actors in our other video. Click on the icon that appears on your screen and watch, and don't forget to like our video. Biographer Express was with you. See you very soon.